Hey, everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. Before I get to today's great guest, I just want to remind everybody my new website, www.markpattisonnfl. I've done over 300 episodes, or almost 300 episodes. This will be episode 291. That's a lot of chats with a lot of people. So tune in there, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. I'm also out speaking quite a bit. So if you want me to come in and light up your audience, your corporation, whatever that might be, reach out to me. I'd love to come out and do that. And my book is still continues to kick ass, Finding Your Summit. Obviously, it's the same name as the podcast. Debuted at #1 on Amazon. So really proud about that. So with that said, let's jump into today's great guest, Ed Marinaro. Ed, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. Good to see you. I love the background there, the mountains. And I'm getting inspired.
Well, I do a lot of that, and I've climbed quite a bit, and we're going to cross over into your world in just a few minutes. But the NFL did do a film on my epic climb up Mount Everest, and it won a Best Picture Emmy Award. As a non-actor, you are an actor. We'll get into that. It was pretty amazing to get up there and be nominated for Best Cinematography, which I did most of the film work up on the mountain, and then also actually winning and being on stage with Mike Tirico, handing me an Emmy Award, which was an impossible dream, but it happened. So it was really cool. But let me just tee this thing up for people who don't know you. You know, you're quite the accomplished guy. You spent 6 years in the NFL. We'll get into that in just a minute. But you're a star running back coming out of high school back east there in New Jersey, and you went on to Cornell, and you had an absolutely unbelievable career. And the thing I was going to start off with right at the top is it must have been just an amazing experience for you to be maybe one of the first ever Ivy League guys to be nominated for a Heisman Award trophy, which, by the way, was always my bucket list goal. I never attained it. But you actually, you didn't win it, but you came in second place. What was that like, that college experience for you?
Well, as you can imagine, the whole college football was so different back then. We're talking
Yeah.
about I was a freshman in 1968, and I was coming out of high school. I was pretty heavily recruited because I was a basketball player. I had basketball scholarships, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And I probably had 30 football scholarships to some, pretty big football schools. The first offer I ever got was from Penn State, and then Duke was right up there. Duke was probably right there on top of the list of colleges I thought I might want to go to. Anyway, I got into Cornell. They don't give scholarships based on sports. They give you financial aid based on your family's need. And I sort of take a certain amount of pride in the fact that I would forego a scholarship, which is a pretty it's a pretty status type thing.
Yeah.
To say you have a full ride to play football in college is kind of cool. But for me, saying that I got into an Ivy League college meant more to me.
Yeah.
Even at a young age, I understood the impact that it was going to have on my life moving forward, which it did. Back then, I think the Ivy League was a little bit more acknowledged and competitive because we had some guys in recent years before me, most notably Calvin Hill and Marty Domres. Calvin played at Yale and Marty played at Columbia. A few years before me, they were first round draft picks in the NFL. People sort of don't remember that, but I remember. And the league was I don't want to say it was more competitive, but it was a little bit more respected from an athletic standpoint. But that was neither here nor there. I certainly didn't expect to have the success I had at Cornell. It was I was I've always said that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I mean, that's sort of trite, but I've lived that way. And when I went to Cornell, we weren't allowed to play as freshmen. We had freshman football. and we only had a 9 game schedule. So I played 3 years of 9 game schedule. And my freshman year, the team ran a certain offense, a very classic split T type of thing. And it was between my freshman and sophomore year, the coaches went to a clinic and they put in the I formation, which, had me 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage in a 2 point stance, and I could go either way. And I didn't realize at the time, but it fit my skill set really well. And I bring up luck. If they hadn't changed that system, I never would have had the kind of career I had as far as, rushing yardage. I mean, it was shocking to me. Like after the fourth game my sophomore year, I was leading the nation in rushing, and I set an Ivy League record against Harvard. We were 20-point underdogs against Harvard, and we beat them. And I gained 281 yards and scored 5 touchdowns. And I was Sports Illustrated back of the week, and I was a sophomore. That I'd never been acknowledged or recognized like that. So it was it was a shock. It was overwhelming, but there was a lot of luck. But I was pretty, I was prepared. Obviously, I was a really good athlete. I mean, I don't want to say great athlete, but I was a basketball player. I could do a lot of things, and so that was sort of a major adjustment for me dealing with the attention I was getting nationally from an Ivy League college. So you know, I was pretty proud of that. And you know, it's been a great journey. Um, you understand pro football um, is a whole different thing. I was lucky.
Before you get there, let me ask you a couple questions. So I've sat around several times with my buddies. This is like a classic, you're in the bar having beers, and there's no right answer or wrong answer, but this whole notion around if you're fortunate enough to be drafted, I went to the University of Washington, and if you're so fortunate enough, and I'm not going to throw Stanford in there, but like say Harvard or Yale or where you went, to have that opportunity, knowing that you're probably set up for life in a lot of respects with the connections you make and the brain power that's going behind going to an Ivy League, versus taking the scholarship, money. And like you said, today is a whole different scenario with all this goofy NIL stuff going on. But, in the day, I mean, we've had a lot of just great positive arguments about what would you do, right? Would you take that? Now, you took the harder path, but probably rewarded you in certain ways because of a lot of forward-thinking people, where you went being around all those other Ivies. And it's a kudos to you to be, especially at a 17, 18-year-old kid, to be forward-thinking like that.
Yeah, I come from a pretty blue collar background. Uh, we weren't poor, but we certainly weren't rich. My father was a sign painter. Uh, my older brother, he was the first in our family to go to college. So, to be honest, the prestige that went along with going to an Ivy League school is probably what influenced me the most. And say forward thinking. I kind of don't remember how forward thinking I was, but when I look back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. It made me feel that, well, the one thing it did do, it didn't put so much pressure on me when I went into the NFL, because I knew that I had a future beyond football. And obviously the alumni group at Cornell or in the Ivy League is very strong. I think I mean, there's something that goes along with being an Ivy League football player. You're doing it without getting paid to do it, basically, without a scholarship. And the level of your teammates is extraordinary. I mean, to this day, I have so many good friendships with my teammates from Cornell, more so than my NFL days. So that that's sort of in reflection. That's pretty cool when you can say that. I have, and my son Eddie, he just graduated from Cornell in December, and we've been doing a job search, and the support I'm getting from my former teammates and Cornell brethren is amazing, and it's sort of kind of it's what I'm talking about. It's that bond you have, and it is special. I mean, when I was in college, pretty much everybody on my football team at Cornell could have gone someplace else. I mean, if even if you're playing in the Ivy League, you're good enough that you could have gotten a scholarship somewhere. Um, on the other hand, there were guys who probably shouldn't have been playing at Cornell, because it was a pretty open audition to try out for the freshman football team. I always tell the story. First, I thought I was one of the few guys they were recruiting that year. And when I went to the first meeting of the freshman football team, there were 139 guys there. And I'm pretty sure some of them never played high school football, but they were trying to get involved in like campus activities, and they
Yeah.
chose football.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. But, it was a great experience. I think the only drawback maybe was that when I didn't win the Heisman Trophy, I'm sure there were people who questioned what I did because I did it in the Ivy League. Um, I did come in second. I'm proud of that. But there was always been a little bit of a stigma attached to Ivy League for the reasons that we spoke of. It's a non-scholarship type of thing, and you have to have certain academic requirements to get in. And a lot of people think if you're smart, you can't be a good athlete. So
Yeah. Well,
I
that's
never I
that.
never thought of myself as being smart. I was just
No, I get what you're saying, but that's somebody else's problem. Okay, so you go on, you runner up in the Heisman, which is like whether you would play at a small school or a large one or whatever the circumstance, just to be in the circle and be invited back there is a huge accomplishment. It's kind of like for me, being nominated for best cinematography. I'm still just in the group if I hadn't won, which I happened to for the big picture, but just again being in that room and in that circle says a lot about you. Okay, so now you go on, you're drafted by the Minnesota Vikings, and you actually got to play in a couple of Super Bowls. I don't think you won either of those because Minnesota went to, I believe, 4 with Fran behind the wheel. And the big accomplishment, kind of like the Bills, is that you actually get to go to the big show, but you kind of were the runner up, and that is what it is. But at least you were there. Somebody has to lose, somebody has to win. But 6 years in the NFL, I played 5. It's just an amazing experience to be able to do that. And I want to kind of quickly go through that because I'm really more interested about life after football, because I think for so many people, you and I, back in the day, there was no transition. You just went off the cliff. And I want to get to that in a second. But tell me about those 2 Super Bowls in Minnesota playing. I mean, you also played back in the day when there was no dome stadium. You were playing in the hardcore cold, and I've been back there, and it's cold. And you did it. So tell me about that.
okay. Before we go on, just to go back to this Heisman Trophy deal,
Yeah.
back when I was in the running, they didn't bring everybody to the downtown athletic club to announce it there. I was sitting in my living room, and I saw the announcement on television where they said I didn't win. I mean, there's a picture that was in the newspaper of me learning that I didn't win the Heisman Trophy sitting in my parents' den. So wasn't the event that it is today. As far as the Super Bowls, they were it's pretty cool that for the rest of my life I can say I played in 2 Super Bowls, even though there's no comparison to the way the game is today and what I experienced. Also, the extra money that we made by playing in the Super Bowl at the time was very significant, and it wasn't a lot, but we weren't making a lot of money playing football. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, what I was making as a second round draft pick. Um, but it wasn't the game. It wasn't the magnitude it is today. It's hard to describe. It was, certainly it was Super Bowl 8 and 9. I played in the last two single digit Super Bowls, and
Awesome.
we played in. I remember we played at Rice Stadium instead of the Astrodome because they were fixing up the Astrodome. Then the next year, when we played New Orleans, we played at Tulane Stadium because I guess the Superdome wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the event that it is today. All the hoopla that surrounds the pregame, the two game stuff. It was. I don't want to say it was just like any other game, but it was to be part of two Super Bowl teams. And yeah, I was almost part of three. You maybe remember the Immaculate Reception against the Cowboys.
Yeah.
We were 40 seconds away from going to the third Super Bowl in a row, and I was a starter at that point, so I would have been starting in the Super Bowl. I played in the two prior ones, but I didn't start. I was going to be a starter, and that was really, really disappointing to lose with 40 seconds to go. Staubach to Pearson, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was a real disappointment. But yeah, I mean, I got a ring. They give you a runner-up ring, which is kind of cool. It's something that it's probably my prized possession. I don't have a lot of prized possessions like that, but that's pretty cool to have it's an NFC championship ring, and I have two of them.
Yeah.
And one day my son will get them. But yeah, it's something, people like to hear about it, but I it was so different. It's hard to
I
even,
know.
just compare. You can't even compare what the Super Bowl has become, like Super Bowl 55, and I was in Super Bowl 8.
I know.
They were still feeling their way back then, and football the game was different. It was very, as I'm older than you, but the
Yeah.
game was different. Yeah, so it's hard for me to relate to today's player or the game the way it's played today. I mean, I don't pretend the quality of the athleticism today is just off the charts, and
Yeah.
it wasn't that way when I was there. I mean,
Yeah, I would argue too, though, that just the way that people start to run kids through in the development of these flag football and in seventh grade, sixth grade, they're lifting weights, and it's just a whole different deal from nutrition all the way down. So, all right, so let's move on to the to life after football. So, as you and I both know, when both of us were done, even when I was playing, there was no trust. And for people who are listening, what the trust is essentially an alumni post career where they help you develop. If you want to become a financial broker and you can go work an intern for Merrill Lynch, you want to become a broadcaster, you want to become a coach, there's all these programs and really help navigate, your path through that. Well, you chose acting, which might be as hard as playing in the NFL, right? In terms of when they stack people up, you're in the 1% of the 1% who actually work. And you've had a number of different hits, Hill Street Blues being maybe one of the most famous shows that you're on. But walk me through what you're thinking about in terms of all these different things that you could have done, probably could have done, yet you decide to go into this challenging career where, it's just like you're going gig to gig and there's no certainty in anything. And yet you did it and you actually succeeded.
okay. Well, first, I was kind of discovered. I mean, I didn't really have any aspirations. Joe Namath is a dear friend of mine, and we were friends. I met Joe when I was a senior in college. I worked at his football camp up in New Hampshire the first year he had the camp, and we became friends. And his agent ended up representing me. Um, so I would meet him out in L.A. When I was playing in Minnesota, I'd go out and we'd hang out, play golf, and run around Beverly Hills. And I met an agent there, his agent, who was working because Joe had done a lot of stuff out there, Hollywood TV, and did some movies. And I don't know when it was, but it was before it was after my last year in Minnesota, my fourth year, and I was out there, and this agent reached out and asked me, would I want to do an audition to replace Lee Majors in the $6 Million Man? I don't know
Love
if you
that show.
remember.
Oh, I love that show.
Okay, so Lee Majors was in a contract dispute, so he was threatening to leave the show. So they were looking for a replacement. Okay, now I had never done any real acting or whatever, but they they flew me out to do a screen test. Okay, so I do the screen test, and when you do a screen test, you sign a contract that if you get the part, this is what we're going to pay you. And let me just say that what I was going to make doing this $6 Million Man was about 10 times what I made playing football. Okay, so, I did the screen test. Obviously, Lee Majors came back. And I remember saying, you know what, if one person out here thought I could do this, let me give it a shot. So I went out to LA during that off season between the time I played my last year in Minnesota and during that off season I signed with the Jets.
Mhm.
So during that off season I went to Hollywood and I got in an acting workshop and I studied for like maybe 2 or 3 months. Then I went back to New York and signed with the Jets. And uh, I got into an acting workshop in New York City. I would go once a week. I was living in Manhattan, and I would go once a week to this acting workshop. So, I'm playing with the Jets, and, Joe's my quarterback. And, I, Lou Holtz was our coach, which is a whole other thing. But anyway, after a little bit of a mediocre start, I ended up with two consecutive 100-yard rushing games. And I hadn't gained 100 yards in a pro game. So this was two. I was leading the Jets in rushing,
Oh, big deal.
scoring, and receiving. Okay, after 7 games. The eighth game of the season, we played the New England Patriots in New England Monday night, and I get a foot injury, like pretty much a career-ending injury. So, I put all my acting stuff on the back burner and I just focused on getting healthy again. And I went back the next year. It was, people, they forget, but back in the day, there was no such thing as an MRI. So it was really hard to they misdiagnosed a lot of injuries. And my foot was something that was misdiagnosed and the wrong kind of treatment, whatever. But I never was 100%. They cut me, the Jets cut me. I was in New York. In midseason, I got picked up by the Seattle Seahawks, which was the second year of their team. And the head coach was Jack Patera, who was the uh, defensive line coach with the Vikings when I was there. So they bring me out to Seattle, and they signed me for 7 games. I didn't play, but I was on the team, and I got another year of my pension. They offered me a contract for the next year, which I turned down. I wanted to go to a team that was I was a veteran.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't gotten hurt, I would have probably played for 10 years. I was, a pretty hell. I never got hurt. I mean, obviously all through college. And anyway, so then I signed with the Bears. I got released from the Bears and I said, I'm done. And I went to Hollywood and I just dedicated myself to, being an actor. And fortunately, I was single. Which made a big difference. I mean, if I had been married, I probably would have had children, and I probably would have said, I got to get a real job. So it was just me. I had saved enough money. I had invested the little money that I made, I invested it with a Cornell alum who really did a great job for me. And, I had the ability to go out there and not work for a while. And I got in a workshop and sort of really became serious about my acting. And then I got, after about 2 years, I got my first break, and it was the result of a girl in my acting class telling me about this role on Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Great
remember
show.
that
Oh
show.
yeah.
Yeah,
Milwaukee.
yeah, so,
Yeah. Great.
yeah, yeah. So I go there and I do this guest role playing Laverne's Italian cousin, who's an immigrant from Italy, and I did this Italian, a broken Italian accent, and it was a one-shot deal, and they offered me they offered me a regular role to come back the next year playing the same role, and I turned it down. I said I do not want to play that role. I'll get stereotyped. So that period between the next season of Laverne and Shirley, I did a pilot for a TV show that didn't get picked up, and they came back to me. Laverne and Shirley came back to me and offered me another role, different role, playing a different character. They moved to LA in the show, and I play a stuntman, and I did 13 episodes of that, and then they fired me, which was devastating. But I was done. And I had some money. They paid me pretty well on Laverne and Shirley, and about a month later, I get an audition for Hill Street Blues to be do a guest star role. I was supposed to do 4 episodes of the show and then get killed. And this was the last 4 episodes of the first season of Hill Street Blues. And it was just starting to get all this critical acclaim, and no one really knew about the show. I didn't know about the show.
Yeah.
So getting 4 episodes was a big deal. And, I didn't care I was going to die. But then after, working on the show for a month or 2 months, I got, developing a good relationship with everybody. And they offered me the, the last episode where I was supposed to get killed. I get a new script and I see they changed the ending where it was sort of ambiguous. It didn't say I was dead.
Oh.
And so we negotiated a contract, and I ended up doing 6 years on the show. They brought me back and I did 6 years. And it was a great experience for a relatively new actor. These people were so talented. The show was so well written and so creative. It was sort of actor proof. You couldn't screw it up. Even a guy who was so new to it, the way they wrote my role was like incredible. And so that was obviously my big break. And during that 7 years, I probably did over a dozen TV movies, and I guest starred on shows, and when the show was canceled, I did probably 4 pilots for other shows, and I was a regular on a show called Sisters for 4 years. Uh, and I worked, I was pretty steady worker. I was the boyfriend in all these TV movies. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, of
And
course.
then, then you probably know I did the show Blue Mountain State. That was
Yep.
about 14 years ago, and that was people forget that when I was doing Hill Street Blues, there were 3 networks, and if you were watching Hill Street Blues at 10 o'clock on Thursday night, you had 2 other options plus the 10 o'clock news.
Yep.
So we got a pretty big audience. It was before streaming. It was before the social media was what it is today. So, we were a top, we were getting 15 million people watching, and we weren't even in the top 10, but we were very critically acclaimed. So anyway, uh, then when Blue Mountain State came along, I mean, it was sort of, it, it was on for 3 years before Netflix even existed. And when we were canceled, we went on Netflix and we became this cult hit, which has been, for a guy like me, and most actors my age are pretty much, you don't get a lot of shots anymore, and you become somewhat irrelevant. The coolest thing about doing Blue Mountain State is I have a fan base of 30-year-old guys. It's crazy. Everywhere I go, there aren't many guys my age who have a fan base, like 25 to 35-year-old men who loved Blue Mountain State. It's literally a cult hit, and it's still on, and it's still they're talking to me about doing a reboot of the show. Um, I don't know when that's going to happen, but that's the fact that they're even thinking about that. It shows you that it's still relevant to you know this audience, and I think it's really cool. I mean, again, it makes me feel like I'm not so irrelevant, because
Yeah.
I go out. If I go to and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. If I go to a restaurant or a bar and everything, and these young waiters and bartenders, they go crazy when they see me, which is kind of cool to be an old fart like me
Yeah.
and get recognized like that. So anyway, life has been pretty good.
Well, one of the things that I was talking about my buddy the other day. There's a priest that came up to him that had retired. This happened in Sun Valley, and he said, he asked my friend. He goes, "Are you retired?" And he goes, "No, he's still working." But he goes, "Just make sure when you do." This priest now just recently retired. Your CPR is intact. And so my buddy asked him in return, "What is CPR?" And he said, "You want to make sure your community, your purpose, and your routine are in play. Like those don't go away. Because a lot of times when you get done acting, right? So for you, right, having that community where you're in Charleston and some people recognize you, you've got buddies, Jonay with other guys that you still stay in contact with, many of your different guys from Cornell, your purpose, you love acting, still trying to stay in the game, trying to stay relevant. And now this new streaming show, Netflix, has come out and has somewhat made you relevant again in terms of all these reruns and playing it and maybe there might be an episode coming forward, and then your routine. I'm sure that you're still a disciplined dude and going out and working out and you have some kind of routine during the day and you still have a passion and a love for acting. So I mean I don't know if all those are equal in terms of each one of those CPR are equal in terms of how you'd slice it, a third, a third, a third. But I think that's what we all try to keep aligned, even whether you're retired or not, to have some kind of purposeful life about what we're all trying to achieve. So, good for you and good luck to you in terms of what that might be.
Yeah, you know what? I think you go through different stages in life, okay? And
Yeah.
I'm stating the obvious, but when you get to be my age, you inevitably you deal with your mortality.
Yeah.
Because you're reminded every day when you see what's going on around you. And in many ways, it's liberating because, I guess you could say I don't ever. I never thought myself as like an overachiever. I mean, I've done well, and a lot of things have just sort of. I don't. They came to me. I don't want to say they came to me easily, but the things that I wanted usually happened, and I know it was this. I don't know. It's a mental approach. I think when I think about what defines me, and you probably feel the same way, what defined me more than anything was my athletic career. Okay. I think when you are part of are successful in what is a meritocracy, when, there's no, either you're good or you're not good. And, like I said, you need luck. I mean, as an athlete, there, you, a perfect example is Tom Brady. Tom Brady got lucky when Drew Bledsoe got hurt.
Yep.
Okay. And, you might never know Tom Brady if Drew Bledsoe doesn't get hurt. Okay. Because he'd been 3 or 4 years in the league, or whatever. You need to have a little bit of luck, especially as a football player. You have to lucky that you don't get hurt. To achieve any amount of success, that has to be part of the equation. You need luck, and you want to take credit for being a great athlete, which you were. I mean, the fact that you played, the odds of anybody playing in the NFL, if you look at it, it's like ridiculously low.
Hmm.
You were by definition, as was I, a world-class athlete
Hmm.
by definition. You don't get to play at that level unless you are exceptional. Okay, and I think that kind of was what drove me in later life. I think that's what made me the kind of person I am. It was my success as an athlete because, man, you know, I tell people the greatest accomplishment, the greatest accomplishment I'm most proud of is I played 6 years, and like I said, I could have played 10 if I didn't get hurt. I'm just saying, but for 6 years in a row, starting my rookie year, I had to go to training camp and win a position. 6 years in a row. And they were bringing in young studs every year. When I was in Minnesota, they kept 5 running backs. In training camp, they brought in 12. Okay. And in 4 years there, I had to win my position. I had to beat out these guys. And you can't have self doubt. You got to think you're better than every one of them, or you bring something that they don't have.
Yeah.
And you have to focus. You have to focus because if you drop a pass in practice, it haunts you that night, when you're trying to win a position. So that's kind of what it made everything else in life seem a little bit easier. Okay, when I went to Hollywood, it's the same thing. You got to be lucky in
Yeah.
Hollywood, and Hollywood is a very subjective place. If you remind a casting agent of a ex-boyfriend who jilted you, you're not going to get the part.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gets very personal where what's a good actor, what's a bad actor, what's a good movie, what's a bad movie. Everybody has an opinion, but when you're playing in a sport, you're either good or you're not good, and then that's just for the most part. So I've defined, I say defined, but I think what gave me my sense of self is my athletic career. My acting career was sort of fun. It was a fun to, not that football wasn't fun, but football was pressure. It
No, no,
was,
I get all that. I get all that. Look at this podcast is going to end here, not by because I want it to, because Zoom says it's going
no
to.
worries, no worries. I get
But
it.
I think that I just want to end up with this that um, you know, we're all born with certain gifts, and I'm so blessed that you came on this pod because you took that football gene as far as you could take it. And then whether you want to call the Hollywood thing luck or not, I mean, there was talent somewhere in there. You had the right kind of look, some of those things you brought to the table and other things, maybe there's some luck involved, but you started this at the very beginning about the preparation meets opportunity and luck that, that's sprinkled in there creates these moments in time. And that's when you are in a position to really take advantage. So to that, and to anybody who's listening, I thank you so much for coming on. You're an all-star in every single way, and just appreciate you. And if I'm in Charleston, I'm for sure gonna look you up. And if you come to Sun Valley, you do have a place to stay right next to the river, and we'll go out fishing together.
Oh, baby, don't tempt me.
I'm tempting you right now. I'm tempting you right
Okay.
now. So, all right. Well, listen, on that note, I appreciate you coming on, and good luck to you in the future.